Hi, I'm Mac McCarthy, and I help people with their breakups. And today we're going to be reviewing the secret to a good relationship, according to Andrew Huberman in this video, which Lex Friedman, a legendary YouTube guy, asks the magic question. Let's get right into it, folks. And I'll be digging deeper into this today in a live stream.
When people say relationship is hard, the only really hard part of a good relationship is just dealing with oneself and making sure that you're staying in that mode of caretaking. Because I do believe that if one is mainly focused on taking good care of the other person, provided they're also focused on taking good care of you to some extent, and we're good at taking care of ourselves, everybody flourishes, everything gets better. But no, I don't think I experienced that until fairly recently.
What do you think is the secret to a successful relationship?
There isn't just one, but at least in the top 5 is master, or at least be good at autonomic self-regulation. Know how to calm yourself down. Don't expect looking to anything external to soothe yourself, is it puts you in a terrible position to be a caretaker of yourself and other people, right? So learn how to self-soothe, right?
This is a great answer from someone that's also deep in the sciences. It's a scientific answer, an autonomic response, right? It's like not everyone would even identify with what that is. It is good advice. I don't know if it's number one, as he said, because you can tell when he's answering this question, he's kind of put on the spot, right? Like, I don't know if this is his expertise. He's giving his opinion. He's an extremely intelligent individual with a wide range of knowledge. But what he's basically saying in layman terms is that the ability to calm down, the ability to not get overly emotional in the moment, right? And so he's saying bring down your autonomic nervous system, right? I even have trouble saying that. And a lot of times they'll say men are less emotional, women are more emotional, and so a man needs to be the reason and logic, and he needs to step away from an emotional argument or fight. And there's a lot of truth to that. Women are much more emotional, but there are men that have no control over their emotions in an argument, in a fight, in a disagreement, and they can go the other direction into the masculine state and just completely lose it and break up or run away from the relationship or just say something they didn't mean long term, but they meant it in the moment to hurt the individual. And I think that's at the core of what he's saying. He's saying that your ability to not react in an overly emotional manner when something's not right in the relationship. So let's get back into it.
Learn how to calm your mind, steady your actions, steady your voice. There are tools to do that. We talk about on the podcast, but elsewhere, have that in place. I also think that if your main focus is on, you want to have good boundaries, et cetera, but on tending to the relationship, doing a little bit more than you think you ought to do, if everyone does that, it goes great. I mean, I'm sometimes so positively struck by how supported I feel, because for many years I was just kind of doing everything on my own. So any little thing, I'm like, oh my goodness, this feels huge. And also I think the dynamics have to be right. Let's be really honest. This is a little bit of a tricky topic, but there is a power dynamic in relationships. Sometimes, not all, but in some relationships, it works much better if one person leads and the other person follows. In other relationships, it's more mutuality, works best. People need to know what they need. And so knowing what you need and what you crave is really important. And then once you do that, you can create the relationship you want.
This is a great point, what he just made. He did an anecdotal thing where he was like, for me, and so this doesn't mean that that's bad advice. He's just saying for how I operate and what I value, just someone being available and being there for me is very special, because it sounds like for a long time he didn't have that person. He did a lot of things alone. He's a quite independent individual. And knowing Andrew Huberman through other interviews, not personally, he's a hard worker. He says he works insane hours and he dedicates a lot of time to his research. So a lot of times people like that tend to put relationships to the back of the bus But when they get into a really good one, they tend to appreciate it, right? And I think that's what he's saying here. But the getting back to the other part of it, knowing what you need and how you operate, but he makes a really good point, and I want to just touch on the fact that what I've noticed as a breakup and relationship coach and dealing with people for years now, right, and hearing all different stories, this masculine feminine thing, right, it's absolutely true. But to take it a step further, someone's going to lead a little bit more or a lot more. But it just has to be agreed on as what you want. Sometimes the woman will lead the relationship, right? Not in my personal relationship, it's not like that. But if that's how you operate and that's what you like and it works, it's fine. So the woman's going to be a little bit more on the masculine and then the guy's going to be a little bit more on the feminine. Now, complaining about that later on is you not being honest with what you need or want in the relationship. Like he said, some relationships tend to be more neutral. Some relationships tend to be more on the scale that someone makes the big decisions, right? And so you can see this. You could see this in relationships where some men have the final say on everything and some women have the final say. As long as the relationship is understood between the both of those people that that's what they want or need, that's what they value, then that's important. And so what he's saying is it's not always equal. Someone's got to agree to be the leader, and someone's got to agree to be the one that maybe doesn't have as much power in the relationship. And I agree with that. All right, let's get back to this.
I've seen that over and over again, and people are different. But I think that ultimately, I mean, right? It's there's the dopamine phase of a relationship, and then there's the serotonin phase, the kind of more mutuality, coziness, and sweetness. There's a great book about how to make sure that the dopamine component and the serotonin component, so to speak, go on forever. And it has to do with, when you first meet someone and you're attracted to them, you're essentially objectifying them. Meaning, not in the way people might think, you are not dependent on them for emotional stability or survival. As you get close with somebody, you really come to depend on them, and then you tend to objectify them less. And so this book...
This is a great point. This is a scientific way to look at it, right? Is what he's saying. A lot of times we call it the honeymoon phase, right? Non-scientific term. And he's saying that the serotonin and the happy juices, if you will, are different. And he's saying in the beginning of that honeymoon phase is what I would call it. You're objectifying that person. You find things that are less attached to them, but over time you become more dependent on them for a variety of things, and the relationship changes, right? And let me give you an example of that. It's just like a lot of times if someone's been with someone for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe the intimacy starts to decline, right? Maybe it's more of a chore. But in the beginning of the relationship, intimacy was outstanding, right? Because that's what you were preparing for. Your attraction led the way for each other. You put a lot of effort in how you looked, and she put a lot of effort in how she looked. And so a specific area such as beauty or good looks were the object of the relationship. But when you are together longer and longer, that starts to dissipate a little bit. It's still important, but it's not as important. And you start to rely on each other for a variety of things, like a ride to the airport, like if you're sick, are you going to make me soup? Those are things that you don't necessarily demand in a relationship, but are appreciated, and that's what makes a relationship grow into something much bigger. And this is what makes it more difficult if you were to break up early and say even a honeymoon phase compared to being in a relationship 3, 4 years where you're much more relied on each other. So let's get back into it.
The book is, the name is kind of corny, but it's written by an analyst again. It's called Can Love Last? And it's a book about how really good, strong relationships are the consequence of people constantly moving through this dependency objectification dynamic. And I use those words in the true, the psychological sense, not in the way they're typically thrown around nowadays. So the idea, in some cultures, men and women will only touch for 2 weeks out of the month. And then for the other 2 weeks, the excitement and the sensuality and the sexuality is very heightened. And then they go back to this kind of distancing. Now, I don't think that's feasible for most people, but if you look statistically, those relationships tend to last a very long time with at least reported mutual feelings of intense attraction.
This is interesting. This is something I didn't know. This is very common with people with a scientific background. They constantly will reference studies or research that's been done. But a lot of times, I'm not sure in this video, but they won't have any links to the research or anything like that. They'll just reference it. And I agree. I haven't heard of this before in any specific culture, but I believe it's out there probably, that someone only gets to see their marriage partner or partner 2 times a month, or, you know, a limited time. Of course, they're going to value the intimacy even more. I'd like to know a little bit more of the dynamics of that. But yeah, here's what I've known. I've known that people, there's a sweet spot. If you just see each other 3 times a week, I've had a lot of clients tell me this. We see each other 2 to 3 times a week. The intimacy is outstanding. The relationship's great. By the way, this is a lot of times how affairs are. This is a lot of affairs. You're meeting in private. You're meeting in quiet. It's only 2 to 3 times a week. You're going to have intimacy. You're not as committed to each other in the sense of seeing each other all the time. You're not sick of each other. And so you value that time more because it's scarcer, and scarcity is attractive, and scarcity is more valuable. All right, let's get back into it.
For many, many, many decades. So human beings need to learn how to at least understand and control these dynamics. And there's a lot of divorce, there's a lot of cheating, there's a lot of stuff out there. It'd be great if people could resolve some of this stuff inside of the relationship, in my opinion.
Yeah, and this kind of intense attraction. There's actually one of the poems that Carl Dasseroth introduced me to. I think it's 2 English Poems is the name. But one of the things I find myself for prolonged periods being attracted to is like you notice some kind of magic and you keep wanting to dig to the depths like of that magic.
You mean to really know that person?
To really know a person deeply, yeah. You notice something early on.
Sure.
I don't know what that is, but you just notice something special. And you want to keep pulling at that thread, and you never really do.
Well, you also have to be careful. You know, I get a lot of questions from guys. You have to be careful the questions you ask in a relationship too. You have to make sure you really want that information. And it's not just about people's past, right? If you ask somebody how they really feel about something about you and they tell you, that may be soothing. It may be intensely stressful.
You can't handle the truth, right? This is a big one for body count. How many guys have you been together? How many guys have you been with before me is a big one for men to women. Lex Friedman's getting off the wall a little bit here, in my opinion. This is what's interesting when someone who has a big platform gets into relationship stuff. And some people, you know, Lex Friedman's a very smart individual, right? I don't know what his background is on knowing about relationships, right? Because that's not something he talks about often. And even Andrew Huberman here is giving you a big scientific take and his personal take. I respect the hell out of both of them. But what Lex Friedman just got into, like this little bit of magic that you see, that you just, it's like, are you attracted to her? Oh, it's not about it's like, it's just esoteric and overly specialized. And I don't know, why it has to be that way. Here's what I would get to. Do you trust them? Are you attracted to them? Do you have a good connection and chemistry? Those are the 3 things. If you can get into the 8, 9, and 10 rating on a scale of 1 to 10 on trust, on attraction, and on connection and chemistry, then you can have a good relationship. If you want to see some more information on this, I am going to be doing a live stream on this, and it will be on the channel. It'll be a deeper dive with more opinions. Check that out. I'll have it in the show notes below.